I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Off a day, this is Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio. You have an opportunity to make a difference, and it starts here at home. Cleanup projects, no matter the scale, help restore our island's beauty. Governor Liu and I invite our community to join us for the Guam Earth Month Island-wide Beautification Cleanup on Saturday, April 24th at 6 a.m. We all have a part in rebuilding a stronger, cleaner, greener Guam. Call 473-1162 for more details.
Off a day. This is Rocky Martinez, professional heavyweight MMA fighter. Nothing gets in my way when I go pro at Subway. Pack a punch with double the protein on any foot-long sub for just $2 more. For a limited time only. Subway. Eat fresh.
Half a day. Patsy Gogri from Security Title with a real estate tip. A power of attorney can be a useful tool when a buyer or seller cannot be present to sign documents, such as a military member deployed overseas. To mitigate its fraudulent use, your escrow officer will contact the seller to make sure they know their property is being sold. When using a power of attorney, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services. Sunday brunch at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro is back. Come and enjoy Mezcla's true taste of Guam. Open for 2 seatings at 10:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. $28.95 for adults and $14.95 for kids 5 to 11 years old. Call 479-2652 or 2653 for reservations.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, and the right of the people to listen to and comment on tall tales shall not be infringed either, right? Yeah, so let's go straight to the Zemi Ikotni for today. I have a special treat for today in Zemi Ikotni. I'll get to it in just a minute. So once again, the Daily News comes up with a potentially good editorial, but kind of misses the point that they ought to be making. Here it goes. Guam needs historic preservation advocate. That's the title of it. Yeah, Guam needs a historic preservation advocate. If bulldozers were bearing down on Jamestown, Plymouth Rock, or Boston's Granary Burying Ground, the nation would be up in arms at the potential destruction of cherished historical sites. But on Guam, where military construction is unearthing both artifacts and human remains, the community has received limited information and has been given little input on how these discoveries should be handled. Numerous finds have been made at Camp Bloss, where a Marine Corps base is being built. 12 ancient burials and 4 graves, including a fetus or young infant, which the governor refused to recognize.
That one doesn't count.
No. 2 children aged 6 or 7, 7 adolescent adults, and 2 older adults over 35 to 40 years. The remains and other artifacts provide insight into how our Chamorro ancestors lived, as well as the complex burial practices involved in caring for the dead. The stories told by the bones, their placement, and other artifacts are part of the historical lifeblood of this island that the ancient people of the Northern Plateau share with the Chamorro children of today. I almost think I need some music for this one, Jose. That history, the thread connecting the hearts of generations, is precious. It deserves to be known explored, and preserved. The military's primary concern is national defense. To that end, we can expect military officials to focus on getting the base built as quickly and cost effectively as possible. But the people of Guam do have a voice in the matter. The State Historic Preservation Office represents the people in negotiations with the military. Let me repeat that. The State Historic Preservation Office, often referred to as the SHPO. And it's right up there with the Speaker, the Chief Justice, and the Governor. The SHPO is a very important person. Unfortunately, officials haven't been forthcoming with the information about the discoveries on the base. It's not officials, it's the SHPO, Daily News. The military, the governor, and the State Historic Preservation Office, also known as the SHPO, knew about the Camp Blas burials for months before the governor and Historic Preservation attended the ceremony on November 4, 2020. Yeah, and I lost the rest of my copy. I'm going to have to go online to pick it up. Something happened to my print. Just take me a second to get there online. Oh, you got it, huh? Thanks, Jose. Going back to the old way of doing things. The State Historic Preservation Office represents the people in the negotiations. Unfortunately, officials haven't been forthcoming on the base. The military, the governor, and the State Historic Preservation Office knew about Camp Blas burials for months before the public was told about them. The governor and the Historic Preservation attended the ceremony on November 4 at the base, where the governor delivered an address in Chamorro and military officials shared preliminary findings on the new burials. The State Historic Preservation Office. Now, this is not an office. This is a person. It's a person, Pacific Daily News. The person is referred to as the SHPO, and their name is Carlota Leon Guerrero. It's not some anthropomorphic office that didn't give you this. There was no public notice a ceremony took place or that more burial sites were discovered. After denying several requests for information about the discoveries, Acting State Historic Preservation Officer, Acting SHPO, Carlota Leon Guerrero released the preliminary report 2 weeks ago. The final report is still pending. Leon Guerrero took over the job when State Historic Preservation Officer Patrick Lujan, a military reservist, went on active duty last week. Now, they've got to get into an irrelevancy here, I suppose, to cover up their own incompetence. Beyond the obvious appearance of a conflict of interest, our representative in negotiations with the military should in no way be employed by the military. The office isn't adequately representing the people. Now, that could have been another story or an article or something, but it's got nothing to do with what this editorial is saying. It is a good way, though, to take a shot at the military, which is the major objective in all of these things. And the editorial goes on to talk about the descendants, the distant family, the history, and then the people deserve a strong advocate for their voices, a champion of transparency who will keep them informed and fight for their interests. Well, that person is supposed to be Carlota Leon Guerrero, also known as the SHPO. And the first time you ran a story about this, a military representative said, "We're leaving this to local authorities, well, don't try to hang it on the military." Carlota Leon Guerrero, the SHPO, is the one that's withholding this stuff, and until the governor gave her a public direct order to release it, she was still hanging on to it. Now, when it comes to transparency, that's the governor's job. And this is what the governor has said about transparency. We are transparent and accountable to the people. We are transparent with reports, meetings, and minutes. As far as I'm concerned, we're following everything that we're required to do. Except tell our SHPO, to respond to sunshine requests when she gets them, not to hang on to them for months, which is exactly what the SHPO did. And then when we got the report was greeted by almost everyone who was interested in it with something like this. A big yawn. I mean, the secrets for military weapons were not there, or something that had to be held very closely wasn't there. It's just, I'm not going to give it to you because I'm the SHPO and I don't have to. But leave it to the Daily News. They want to blame it on the military. They don't want to assign blame where blame belongs, which is directly on Carlotta Leon Guerrero. I get a kick out of the title of their editorial. Guam needs historic preservation advocate. That's what the SHPO is supposed to be.
And they actually answered their own title in it.
Exactly. The State Historical Preservation
Did
Office.
somebody take over the editorial halfway?
I don't know. You guys got some work to do over there, Kaleo. You're not running boilerplate anymore, but you're not going to get a Pulitzer Prize for this kind of garbage.
PEW?
Yeah, Pulitzer. All right, so much for that. I'm going to go back to yesterday's editorial for a moment, and I have something to prove here. Now, you'll recall that this editorial talked about people named Kenneth Cooper and Francine Napity, and that they are speaking Chamorro at home with their kids. And then the editorial talked about Michael Bavacqua and all his good works, and we're finally doing something about bringing Chamorro back. It starts out like this. At one point, not too long ago, the Chamorro language was in serious decline. Well, it's still in serious decline because no one is doing anything about it. And I made the point yesterday that you've got the Chamorro establishment that has come up with this cockamamie orthography, which will do nothing but confuse people, even those who speak the language, not to mention those who don't. They have gotten themselves an office space. They've got a nicely equipped office space, and they're doing everything we would expect bureaucrats to do. They haven't done anything about the preservation of Chamorro. But, of course, this is typical of Democrats. It doesn't matter what the problem is. When a Democrat is faced with a problem, the usual answer is, we'll start a project. We'll create an agency. And nothing has happened. I presented my own method as to how we could deal with this, and it depends on the people, not the government. My first recommendation is get the government the hell out of it. And then we had a caller chime in who repeated himself a little bit, who told about, the facts about learning Chamorro if you were not a native speaker. It's not about diacritical marks and rules, and et cetera. So I ran across, and the thing that kicked this off was changing the name of Talafofo to Talofofo. Yeah, a big change. We took Santa Rita and Talafofo and put some diacritical marks in, and then sat back and said, man, we're really doing great work here. This is the Chamorro Language Commission. Well, I went back into my memory and I dug up this from the research branch of the Tall Tales think tank brought this up. And it's from Robert Underwood. Underwood, more adults should learn Chamorro. That's what he said. And then he said, amongst my many heroes are Professor Maguette Bavacqua, Dan Fitzgerald, and former Senator Bob Klitzkie. Yeah. You know, Jose, I don't like to talk about myself on the show here, but this time I have to because it's about me.
Carry on.
So he says, my many heroes, Maget Bavakwa, Ken Cooper, Dan Fitzgerald, former Senator Bob Klitzkie. None of these individuals grew up speaking Chamorro, but all of them can carry a legitimate conversation in Chamorro. They all learned Chamorro as adults. I'm constantly amazed by their level of knowledge and the fact that they learned Chamorro against all odds. And then he goes into a trip that he took to New Zealand and comes back and says, Chamorro language is the single greatest treasure that connects people of this island to their origins and their history. Everything else pales in significance. And he really lays it out here. The language is a single treasure that ties everything together. No singing, chanting, dancing, eating or wearing sinahis will substitute for genuine effort toward learning and speaking Chamorro. Yeah. I'm disappointed with all the hand-wringing and sometimes pompous statements about the state of Chamorro language by adults who sign petitions and decry the loss of their language. These statements typically say something like, quote, I never learned Chamorro because my parents decided the schools forbade me and somebody needs to do something like pass more laws, create more programs for children, develop a website, or do something in the name of Chamorro. We need a program. We need immersion programs for children, but we need immersion programs for adults as well, so they have the opportunity to make a contribution to the future of the Chamorro people. Several years ago, I spoke at a Chamorro conference in Saipan. I had to counter some statements in previous conferences that you don't have to speak Chamorro to be Chamorro. I pointed out that some men were willing to pay up to $300 to buy a Sinahi, but not spend $30 to buy a Chamorro dictionary.
Nice.
Yeah. And then he goes on to say that he was fortunate that his parents, who not only spoke Chamorro to each other, but to him, but most of the knowledge of the Chamorro that I developed as an adult who studied Chamorro and spoke it awkwardly. Appling, usa fino Chamorro cada dia lo dispensa usa appling Chamorro. Yeah, mine is broken. But continually and wherever I could, whether testifying at the United Nations or on the floor of the legislature. So all you, Laura Souter, I ought to probably email this to Laura Souter so she could read it, and Hope Cristobal and what's her name, Anna. I can't remember her name.
Hattori.
Yeah, Ann Hattori for sure. And what's her name? Munya. I can't remember the first names. So, yeah, the Chamorro establishment really needs to read this and understand it and figure out what they're doing is not helping anything at all.
It's always great intentions, but having to mandate it this way doesn't help.
It doesn't help. So if the Chamorro is going to survive, you got to get it out of the government, and you find a dedicated group of people in the private sector who will actually jump in here and do it, and follow a suggestion like mine. You know, you take native speakers, you give them a little badge, you give them a little training as to how to bring people from dead stop to 10 miles an hour. Turn them loose on the population. Hire somebody who understands marketing and figure out a strategy that makes speaking Chamorro cool to the kids. And you might have something. But, you know, a fancy edifice, horsing around with silly orthographies. I think Robert really nailed it here. And, of course, I thank him for his kind words. All right, so much for the daily news. I notice my lights are lighting up already. Maybe I'll go to the phones before I go to the post. Maybe people want to talk about Ifinot tomorrow. Let's see who we got here. I've got our Carl and another Joe. It seems like this is like deja vu all over again, isn't it? Okay, let's take a short break and then we'll come back to the most dangerous man in the room.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
The vaccine is officially here, and we aren't just talking about the COVID vaccine, but a financial vaccine at Bank Pacific. We may not be doctors, but we can help you with your financial health. Whether to take advantage of today's crazy low rates, or just a local bank that has your back. At Bank Pacific, we want to help make 2021 your best year yet. Because for 66 years, where others put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
Okay, so here we are mid-Zemi Ikotni, and I've got two anxious telephone callers here on the line who I thought I would deviate from the usual routine to accommodate, starting out with the most dangerous man in the room. None other than our Carl. Good afternoon, our Carl.
Good afternoon, Your Excellency, or Eminence, whichever it is.
Either way, whatever comes out easier for you. Either one will work, Carl.
Okay. I just wanted to comment. You know, my mom was Chamorro, and I really feel that I missed out on a golden opportunity. You know, if I could go back, I would ask my mom, please, when I'm home, please speak in Chamorro to me. Because as you pointed out, you know, when you're young, we're like little sponges. We can absorb 1, 2, maybe even 3 languages very easily. And I feel I missed out on that opportunity to have that tool in my tool belt, and I've paid the price many times over the years. Unfortunately, I'm not really that interested in languages. In middle school at Agada, I took 1 year of, I don't know why, but I took French for 1 year. And as soon as I was out of French, you know, that school year was over, I stopped using French. And
well, there aren't a whole lot of opportunities to use French here on the island unless you happen to know a gentleman named Frenchie who calls here from time to time.
Exactly. Going back, I probably should have taken something like, you know, Spanish, but they weren't offering Chamorro at the time. But that would have been the best option. But, you know, there are tens of thousands of Chamorros who speak fluent Chamorro and really very well. You know, being taught in a classroom, I've heard that people can tell when you've learned Chamorro in a classroom, usually.
Well, as I understand it, you can tell because what you learn in the classroom is how to weave baskets and how to cook and do everything but speak the language. That's my understanding from people that have actually been enrolled in the classes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I thought it was serious language learning. But I've heard that people that learn it through a classroom tend to sound a little odd, just off. And people who are fluent in Chamorro, sometimes they make fun of that, you know, some of the phrases that come out just a little bit too stiff. But, you know, we see an example of exactly what you're talking about every day on Guam and across America in immigrants that come to America, especially the first generation that are first-generation Americans. They're when the kids come home, they speak the mother tongue. That's all there is to it. So the younger, the generation after the first generation, I think they still tend to hold on to the language because the parents really value that, the traditions and the language, and they enforce that. When you're at home, you speak Filipino, or you speak Chinese, or you speak Japanese. Maybe by the third generation, it might start having some problems. But that first generation is really very good at conveying the language to the next generation. And I just think you're right on target when you say that. Like so many things, it begins and ends in the family.
I thought you were going to say
classroom.
like so many things that you're always right about, Bob, but go on with your story, Carl.
Yeah, the family is very important, and I think you're right on. It's a built-in resource that people can use to learn the language.
Well, my point is that fancy offices and silly orthographies won't cause anybody to learn anything. In fact, it'll probably have the opposite effect. It'll tend to be a repellent for anyone who doesn't speak Chamorro and would like to learn how.
Yeah, for most of the people, as soon as the classroom is over, especially people who are Chukis and, Caucasians and Filipinos who really have no real need to speak the language. As soon as that class is over, they're going to drop it. If they don't have a compelling, motivating reason to keep it up in day-to-day use, it's going to go. But there are people like you, and I know of a few Filipinos who've moved to Guam. They married Chamorritas, and they speak fluent Chamorro. They had that motivation, and they picked it up. No classroom, not even 5 minutes in the classroom. But I think you're right on. The classroom is, having a fancy classroom is not the answer. It's
or even short of that, they've got a fancy office, not even a classroom. This Chamorro Language Commission has, they're having a race with the Ethics Commission to see who can build the biggest empire the fastest. Whether anybody actually learns Chamorro is kind of irrelevant. That's my analysis of the whole thing. But let me find out what another Joe has got to say about it. Okay, Carl?
Yeah, and I'll just drop one seed into your mind of something maybe for future conversation. I've noticed there's a trend of changing the village names. I saw some signs in Dedido where it's now Dedidu. And, are we asking the residents who actually live here and have to deal with the change?
Of course not.
They want that?
Of course not. We have a commission. And that was one of the things I went off on yesterday. We have a Chamorro Language Commission, and they will change the name of your village whether you want it changed or not. And it's, once again, the state coming in here and deciding things because the people really aren't capable of making these decisions themselves.
Yeah, I think that's a very authoritarian way to do it, especially something so fundamental. But
it gives them an opportunity to show off their new orthography. See, so it's all tied together. Anyhow,
okay, Bob.
Thanks for calling, Carl.
Good talking with you.
All right, and then we go from there to another Joe. Good afternoon, another Joe.
Thank you, Bob. So, I think you're right. It's going to be about the bureaucracy more so than being pragmatic. And initially, it's the official Chamorro language, which really you'd have to date it. You probably could date it to the early to mid 1900s because there would be the colloquial Chamorro spoken at that moment in time when they actually took the effort to document it, and it's the pronunciations and spelling which they themselves adapted from influence from different European powers. The priest and from wherever they came from in Europe, and what I noticed when I was a kid listening to Chamorro spoken, there's a lot more what you would call tongue twisters, which I seriously doubt most of the younger generation from 60-year-old down can pronounce the Chamorro the same way that these older Chamorros around your age group and older could.
Another Joe, you could say that about any language. Language is dynamic, and that's why we think it's all right to talk. I can mention the person on the other side of the glass here as they, because language is dynamic. Sometimes I don't like the changes, but
how dare you?
Yeah. So Chamorro is what you hear today. That's Chamorro, and there's no sense trying to learn anything other than what you hear today.
Like I will listen to Chamorro, and I say, "Hey, say that word." And they say, like for example, saipan. I said, and then they would talk about Japan. I said, "Okay, now pronounce Japan." And then to my hearing, I couldn't distinguish much of a difference between the two pronunciations in the old the pronunciations. And I attribute that rather to I started school stateside, and I didn't really go back to public school here in Guam until I was a teenager, and they would tease me, and that's another reason why I didn't really pick it up quickly, because I have this thing about people teasing me about the way I pronounce words. So even though I'm immersed around a bunch of Chamorro speakers, those elders, who are good fun and poking fun at the way you speak Chamorro, they do it often enough. You start thinking, okay, I'm not going to try to pronounce it because I'm going to keep getting teased about the way I pronounce the Chamorro word.
I kind of went through that yesterday, another Joe, and I pointed out that if English is your mother tongue, and you live here or in a lot of other places in the world, you're very accustomed to hearing people speak English for whom it is not their mother tongue, and they make second language errors, and you just take it in stride. But it's very difficult to find someone who speaks Chamorro who is not a native speaker. So when you hear someone who's not a native speaker speaking the language and he makes a mistake, it's really odd. It's kind of strange. So I'm just going to tell one little personal experience here about how you learn language, and then we'll move on to something else. Okay, another Joe?
Already.
Okay, a long, long time ago, over 50 years ago, there was a store in Barrigada, Diaz store. And Mr. Diaz was from Saipan, and back over 50 years ago, there were older folks that really didn't speak anything but Chamorro. Didn't speak any English at all. So every day I would go over to that store and buy a little carton of milk. And we kind of had this routine. I'd walk in there and he'd say, malagomo, pop. And I'd say, malagozo letzi. And he'd say, hafuna klasi malagomo. And I'd say, brushu. And he'd say, he'd say, brushu pat chocolate. And I'd always say, brushu. Because I figured brushu was the way you said white in Chamorro. Younger folks wouldn't know what I'm talking about here, but clue. I went on for 10 years thinking that Gifino Chamorro na I palabra white, brushu. But back in the day, over 50 years ago, Foremost put out a brand of milk called Blue Seal. But Mr. Diaz's approach to Blue Seal was brushu. So I'd go over there every day and hey, Jahu Nadzi brushu? Kogwa? Unga, brushu. So that's kind of how language learning functions. You're not really precise. You're not looking at the book. You figure out things that work for you, and as the farther you get into it, the better you become at it. But the hardest part is the first part, getting started in the beginning. Another Joe. Anyhow, I got somebody else who wants to, let's see, this would be Ray Ray Arceo, who wants to talk about Ifino Chamorro, I guess. So,
okay, well, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for calling, another Joe. Is that what Ray wants to talk about, Jose? Is that what Ray wants to talk about? Yeah.
Ray Arcero from Horao Academy.
Horao Academy. Good afternoon, Ray Arceo.
Hey, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Buenas.
Hungyan. I grew up also with the blue seal. The
Blue seal.
Blue seal Hungyan, which is in the sense of the milk, the milk. Yeah, those were the times. Hungyan. But, this is very interesting, most especially for your listeners out there. This is Ray Arceo, the husband of Anna Marie Arceo, who
Okay. Whose name I couldn't remember. Yeah, but go ahead.
Hungyan. Lo down to because this is very interesting, because we are being challenged, with our tomorrow language in the 21st century. But going back to 2005, my wife and I, we are the founders of, at the time it was just Horal Academy. So fast forward, we did. At first, it was just a cultural camp. It started off with just a summer camp, and it was then we actually saw the actual birth of the immersion program. We actually, most especially because this is my wife's passion, that she discovered that it was actually the immersion program that was very effective. Because we were getting feedback from the parents, and we saw the development of the language and culture in the kids, most especially at that age, from 5, 6, and in the teenage years. And it was actually the growth then that we actually saw that, okay, wow, this is not only working, but there's a demand for it. So in our growth from originating from Sinahanya mayor's office, thanks to Mayor Bloss at the time, and Assistant Mayor Hoffman at the time, that supported us, jump started actually the program. And then we migrated, we were nomads there for so many years, from Sinana to Barragata to Haganya, and then Attorney Lujan sponsored us, into the corn building at the time, which is no longer, existing. It was demolished. But then, and then we went right into the Tomorrow Village. I manage the actual logistics, for Chief Rural Academy since day one, and I tell you, it's a never-ending process. But nevertheless, we saw the growth, so we were committed. And you're absolutely right. Because of our success, we had no ties to the government of Guam, meaning that our internal processes, rules and regulations, it was just governed internally. So our many of our successes has been that we've provided to the community outreach, hence why we were supported by, many corporate sponsors, to include, like, for example, GTA, Bank of Guam, Chugas, Alaska at the time, and the list goes on. Home Depot, they embraced, the language and culture, and what our mission was, and wholeheartedly, they supported us. So fast forward today, we entered into agreement with, the Department of Education, and it's been such a difficult, very, very difficult process, because yes, we started seeing the restrictions. We started seeing, like, wow, we can't do this, we can't do that. And then we saw, like, wow, okay, maybe it's not really what we intended. It was supposed to be a private, partnership, collaboration, to enter into the immersion program, but we saw a lot of restrictions. So, we're revisiting, our mission again, and perhaps maybe at some point we want to detach ourselves, and just go independent, because our success has been in the growth. But then again, our focus has been with the immersion program. It has been effective. Yeah.
I got a break coming up here, Ray, but I do want to mention something here before I let you go.
Yes,
and,
yes.
and that is that there's no question, but the better way to learn a language is total immersion. That's how we all learned it at home, right?
Yes, absolutely.
However, the numbers, and in order to have total immersion for a significant number of folks on the island, that would be perhaps an undertaking that might be a little too ambitious. So I'm interested in something that can go out on the street, as I mentioned yesterday and today. So I'm going to leave you with that thought. Maybe you and Anne Marie can work on something like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. We are open and very innovative, with new ideas. Anything that we understand that short term and long term goal, that would be our focus. So yes, I thank you so much for instilling that opportunity, and it's a great one. And it is doable. It is doable and possible. So thank you so much for entertaining my call. And you have a nice evening, sir.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Donc, nasa-Diyos mo ang sipo at todo do ako ng sasabi, but ito tawag.
Hagumas,
Okay, esta, adios.
All right, so there we are.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tumon is back with all your mezcla favorites, like oxtail cadu, Kahlua pig and cabbage, and Chef Peter's style black stew frittata. Mezcla is ready to welcome back everyone with great service in a safe and friendly environment. Come on down and visit Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tumon, located on the first floor lobby of the Grand Plaza Hotel. Open for lunch from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. and for dinner from 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. Call 969-2652 for reservations. Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
Happy Day, this is Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio. Earth Month is a global movement, and it starts here at home. From Jigo to Inalahan and everywhere in between, cleanup projects, no matter the scale, help restore our island's beauty. Let's reconnect with our island and join us for the Guam Earth Month island-wide beautification cleanup on Saturday, April 24th at 6 a.m. We all have a part in rebuilding a stronger, cleaner, greener Guam. Call 473-1162 for more details.
Okay, so here we are, back again for more Zemi Ikotny. I'm going to move on now to the Post. And I was just peeking at Facebook here just a minute ago, and Elwin Champako Kitano, who is something of a student of the language, etc., chimes in and says, the greatest enemy of the old indigenous ways are those entangled in the business of language teaching and the selling of irrelevant artifacts and made-up fake traditions throughout the many decades. Kind of the same sentiments I've expressed myself, Elwin. Okay, let's go to the Post. And the title of the Post is, a government director deemed not suited for the job still has his job. And it starts out with the three words, only on Guam. Now, you younger folks wouldn't remember this, but there once upon a time was a man named Joe Murphy, guy I knew very, very well. Joe Murphy came over here in 1965 to be the editor of the Daily News, the Guam Daily News. And without going into a lot of details, Joe was the editor, and he never actually got out with a paper sack and delivered the papers, but I think he did everything else in the beginning. And he used to write a column called Pipe Dreams. Yeah, you could say things like that back in the day. I don't think you could glorify tobacco nowadays that way. So he wrote a column called Pipe Dreams, and he invented the phrase only on Guam, which was abbreviated OOG. In fact, he even wrote a couple books called OOG, zeroing in on some of the peculiarities of living on our island. So the person who wrote this editorial for the Post apparently goes back that far, saying, only on Guam. That's a phrase that some who have been on island long enough will use to express bewilderment that a government official or employee seems to be untouchable from their public employment, even if they committed wrongdoing or failed to do their job right. Let me see. Are they talking about Ike Pareto here? Oh, no, it couldn't be Ike Pareto because the lieutenant governor weighed in and told us that Ike got a bad rap, right? Yeah. No, it's not Ike Pareto. This is the case with Administrative Director Jack Hattick of the Chamorro Land Trust Commission and Hattick Gate. Hattick answers to a board whose chairman, John Regis Jr., recently said the commission felt the administrative director was not suited for the position. This was after Hattick went against a land agent's recommendation not to approve a questioned land swap that did not meet the legal requirements for such a transaction. The land agent had previously stated in a public meeting she felt coerced to include on her report the land swap Hattick wanted. Hattick subsequently overruled the land agent and recommended the land swap that wasn't legal to begin with. Recommended it to the commission, trying to slide one under the radar. But that's not all. In a recent meeting, Hattick was asked if he had made some headway on a set of tasks the commission expected him to do more than 2 years ago. Commissioner Angela Santos recently asked Hattick how far he'd progressed with a list of priorities given to him in June of 2019. Hattick skirted answering that question extemporaneously, saying he did not have that information available at the meeting because he thought it was in Tello's purse. Now we know. Ray, I hope you're listening. Now we know what was in Tello's purse.
That's a big purse.
Yeah. Okay. Back to stopping. I'm going to stop ad-libbing here and get back to the editorial. Saying he did not have that information available at the meeting, but promised to provide the information as soon as possible. Efforts to get an interview with Hattick have not been successful. Needless to say, an administrative director who couldn't say right off the top of his head what tasks he has accomplished from a list given to him 2 years prior isn't providing a good sign of his job performance or that he's on top of his duties. But in spite of all this, we're not getting a lot of answers on whether this director will be held to some form of accountability. The commission might no longer believe in Hattick, but he's able to hang on to his job as of press time. I think he has a family. This may be the explanation, right? I haven't researched it thoroughly, but this may be the answer to the question. The governor has met with the CLTC chairman on the Hattick issue, but the outcome of their discussion has not been public. Yeah, and it has not been covered public. We are transparent and accountable to the people. We are transparent with reports, meetings, and minutes. As far as I'm concerned, we're following everything that we're required to do. Famous sayings from the governor. Yeah. The governor has met with the CLT chairman on Hattick issue, but the outcome of their discussion has not been public. For the members of the public, and most especially for the lease applicants and beneficiaries of land trust land who would like to see improvements and processes improve at the CLTC, this secrecy and apparent lack of accountability is disheartening. There is another layer of scrutiny that should be shining light on the leadership of the CLTC under Hattick. The legislature, and specifically Speaker Therese Tetlahi, can also help dig in the issue. On Tuesday evening, Tatlahi released a statement in part saying, the commission needs to focus on getting the residential leases processed, so they need to get a director they can rely on to focus on applicants waiting since 1995, to seek reimbursement of the survey fund that was raided, and to move forward fairly and efficiently. A question also needs to be posed to the Guam Office of the Attorney General. Is it looking into the Hattic issue, whether this requires opening an investigation? Now, once again, from what I read about what happened at that at that meeting, when Hattic took the report of someone else and added to it, I read that report, gave you the facts, read the statute that defines forgery. The Attorney General can read. So what's going to happen there, Mr. Leaving on a jet plane? So I would be critical of Therese on one point here, and that is that the commission needs to focus on getting the residential leases processed. So they need to get a director. The first thing, you got to get a director. You don't need to concentrate on anything else. As long as you have what you have, which is just like what we had before under the old administration, you're probably doing people a disservice when you give them a lease, because the lease may not be any good. We saw that happen during the last administration. So, and then I have an article that ran on the front page of the Post. Tatlahi, commission needs a director they can rely on. With the Chamorro Land Trust Commission stating it believes Administrative Director Jack Hattic is not suited for the position, Speaker Therese Tatlahi, oversees land issues, stated she expects the commission to exercise its exclusive authority over the hiring and supervision of the administrative director. Now, that's something that no one picked up, none of the media picked up on before, but the commission hired Hattic. The commission can fire Hattic. They can fire him for a good reason. They can fire him for no reason at all. They probably can't fire him for a bad reason, like he's black or white or something like that. But they don't even need to have a reason to fire him. So what is this? We're going to go to see the governor. And, you know, when I saw that, of course, my suspicious nature took over, and I'm thinking, probably Regis went to see the governor to see if the governor could persuade Rory to hire Hattic down at the port. Even though, as far as I know, he's never been convicted of official misconduct, Rory might be able to find a slot for him down there anyhow. Otherwise, why is Regis going to the governor? Permission, yeah. So the stated she expects the commission to exercise its exclusive authority over the hiring and supervision of the administrative director. Meaning, he should have been out of there by now. When you said you didn't think he was well suited to the job, the next sentence should have said, pack your bag, Jack. Or, wait a minute.
Hit the road.
Hit the road, Jack. I wish... It's too bad we don't have that copyright restriction. We have that copyright restriction, right? Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more, no more. That's what he should have said when they decided that he couldn't do the job. Therese goes on to say the commission needs to focus on getting the residential leases, etc. Same thing that the editorial picked up. And focus on applications waiting since 1995 to seek reimbursement of the survey fund that was raided. And I remember that money, the governor took that money and spent it on something else. So let's take a short, we'll break for the halftime show, and then we'll go up to Barragata Heights where some of the nicest land trust lands, their leaseholds are located.
is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The country marks a vaccine milestone. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. President Biden announcing that 200 million Americans have now been inoculated against the coronavirus. But don't take your mask off yet.
If we let up now and stop being vigilant, this virus will erase the progress we've already achieved. The sacrifices we've made, the lives that have been put on hold, the loved ones who've been taken from us. The time we're never going to get back.
The president also wants employers to give paid time off to people to get the vaccine or to recover from it if they have after effects. The Los Angeles Dodgers are opening a fully vaccinated fan section for Saturday's game against the Padres, where social distancing will not be required. Its use still on hold. One plant's manufacture of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is now paused.
The FDA issued a report that says the emergent manufacturing plant in Baltimore, Maryland, has several issues. The report commented on the lack of cleanliness in some areas, noting peeling paint on walls close to vaccine production, and said workers sometimes moved manufacturing waste through the warehouse, and said that could cause contamination. The FDA ordered a pause on vaccine manufacturing at this plant and said the vaccines already made will undergo additional testing before they're distributed.
Fox's Jessica Rosenthal reports that same plant recently ruined 15 million vaccine doses by mixing up ingredients. For a second night, hundreds of people marching in Columbus, Ohio, over Tuesday's fatal police shooting of a teenage girl. Body camera video showing the officer fired to stop the girl from stabbing another teen. Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan, who's from Columbus, telling Fox's Hannity.
This is a tough situation, but I don't know what else this officer could have done. There'll be an investigation, and we'll see what happens there.
Ohio's Governor Mike DeWine says he'll send state lawmakers a police reform bill within days. America is listening to Fox News.
The vaccine is officially here, and we aren't just talking about the COVID vaccine, but a financial vaccine at Bank Pacific. We may not be doctors, but we can help you with your financial health. Whether to take advantage of today's crazy low rates, or just a local bank that has your back. At Bank Pacific, we want to help make 2021 your best year yet. Because for 66 years, where others put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.
Off the day, this is Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio. You have an opportunity to make a difference, and it starts here at home. Cleanup projects, no matter the scale, help restore our island's beauty. Governor Liu and I invite our community to join us for the Guam Earth Month Island-wide Beautification Cleanup on Saturday, April 24th at 6 a.m. We all have a part in rebuilding a stronger, cleaner, greener Guam. Call 473-1162 for more details.
A court challenge already to Florida's new anti-riot law.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a bill 2 days ago creating tougher penalties for people who participate in violent protests. A lawsuit filed Wednesday against the Republican governor and others states the so-called anti-riot law violates constitutional protections for free speech, protections against cruel and unusual punishment, and protections of due process. A spokesman for DeSantis says the governor will firmly defend the legal merits of the new law. The legislation allows police to hold arrested protesters until a first court appearance and establishes new felonies for organizing or participating in violent demonstrations. Opponents of the new law say it's racist and meant to silence social justice groups like Black Lives Matter. Steve Rappaport, Fox News.
The prime suspect in Kristen Smart's disappearance has been given a better chance to get out of jail.
Ruben Flores, whose son is believed to be the last person to see Kristen Smart alive, has had his bail lowered. Judge Craig Van Ruyen cited health issues among the reasons for setting an affordable amount from $250,000 to $50,000. Ruben Flores has pleaded not guilty to being an accessory to Smart's disappearance in 1996. His son, Paul Flores, is charged with murder and is being held without bond. Both were arrested last week after police say evidence of a body that had been recently moved was found at the elder Flores home. So far, Kristen Smart's body has not been recovered. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
An upcoming international peace conference that was supposed to move Afghanistan's warring sides toward a power-sharing deal and ensure an orderly transition of the U.S. from the country has been postponed. Sponsors of the conference said no meaningful progress in talks are on the horizon. This comes just days after the Taliban dismissed the conference that was to take place in Istanbul, Turkey, as a political spectacle serving U.S. interests. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Off a day. This is Roque Martinez, professional heavyweight MMA fighter. Nothing gets in my way when I go pro at Subway. Pack a punch with double the protein on any foot-long sub for just $2 more. For a limited time only. Subway. Eat fresh.
Half a day. Patsy Gogri from Security Title with a real estate tip. A power of attorney can be a useful tool when a buyer or seller cannot be present to sign documents, such as a military member deployed overseas. To mitigate its fraudulent use, your escrow officer will contact the seller to make sure they know their property is being sold. When using a power of attorney, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tumon is back with all your mezcla favorites, like oxtail cadu, Kahlua pig and cabbage, and Chef Peter's style black stew frittata. Mezcla is ready to welcome back everyone with great service in a safe and friendly environment. Come on down and visit Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tumon, located on the first floor lobby of the Grand Plaza Hotel. Open for lunch from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. and for dinner from 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. Call 969-2652 for reservations. Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
Okay, so here we are after that big halftime show, the marching bands, the cheerleaders, etc., and that barrage of cannon fire at the end. Means we're in the second half of Tall Tales, and I got a little over an hour here, or a little under an hour, to complete another exciting, elucidating, educational episode of Tall Tales, and I'm going right back to the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. Picking up where the article says, the article I ran on the front page of the Daily News says, CLTC Chairman John Regis Jr. announced last week that the commission did not believe Hattick is suited to head the agency. The governor met with the chairman Monday, but details of that meeting have not been released. Titlahi, that's Senator Therese Titlahi, said the commission has the sole authority to handle any personnel matters regarding the administrative director, and that she has not been privy to any information disclosed during their last two executive sessions. Now, I'm going to kind of make a prediction here. I think John Regis Jr. is playing with fire. I think that John Regis Jr., like so many people on boards and commissions, go through this thought process. We have to make a hard decision. The discussion of this decision may be embarrassing for some people. It may be such that some of the board members will feel that they are being put on the spot. It could be, if we did this in public, some of the board members might, at one time or another, get the Atan Baba. So it's absolutely clear in the law that if there is a well-grounded fear in getting the dreaded Atan Baba, any board or commission can meet in executive session just by standing up and saying, we're going into executive session. John Regis Jr., I think you may be playing with fire. Not obeying the strictures of the open government law can have serious consequences, very serious consequences. Going back to the editorial, during a commission meeting in February, a land agent said Haddock coerced her into including an illegal land application swap in her report to the commission. Haddock stated he did not force her to make changes, but he added his own recommendations to the report. And again, this story is abbreviated, but it was very clear that what Haddock said, well, you know, the land agent said, this is how we got in all this trouble last year. People can't swap places in the line. Council said the same thing. And then Haddock came along and said, well, you know, we thought we'd try it. And if it worked, fine. And if it didn't, well, at least we'd know in the future. So in other words, Haddock's land agent would not draft up a recommendation to the commission recommending that the commission take any legal action, that they let the people swap places in line, and that a lease be granted to the swappee. She said, I'm not going to do that. Haddock said, well, here, let me have that report. Let me borrow your pencil. And he writes in that recommendation on the bottom of the paper. Figures, he looks around to see who's looking, and then kind of tiptoes up and says, oh, here, Mr. Chairman, here's a recommendation for you as to how to deal with that land.
Signed by the agent.
Uh-huh. Well, actually not signed by anybody, but it says on the top, it's the land agent's report. Yeah. So, so it's clear to me that Haddock thought he would just slide one by, get one over, and if he didn't, well, what's the downside risk? Well, it looks like he was right, because apparently there's no downside risk. You get caught red-handed with something that has the elements of forgery in an open meeting, and the only thing that happens to you is the meeting is adjourned, and the next meeting, the chairman says, we don't think that you could do the job here, Jack. So we're going to talk to the governor, but in the meantime, you stay on the job.
Unless he knows he's already protected by the governor.
Very possibly, very possibly. Maybe Rory said, no, I took too much heat over Frankie Rosselin. I'm not going to take Jack Haddock down here. Besides that,
she was quick to defend him.
Yeah, she was. The governor actually said, when this first broke out, she said, so I'm going to paraphrase, she said something like, I'm really not up to speed on what's going on there, but I'm sure that Jack didn't do anything wrong. You know, she stood behind him. Maybe she's a baseball fan. I don't know. So
we got to learn her signs.
Yeah. The incident nonetheless created concern amongst commissioners. The CLTC chairman then interviewed staff and generated a report on the issue, which the commission discussed during closed session and which they have not published. Nobody can see that. Of course, we know where it is. We know where to find it. All we got to do is just track down Cello. Wait until Cello goes out to eat somewhere, goes to the ladies' room and leaves her purse behind her on the table. Yeah. And then we could, you know, it might not be legal to be snooping around in Tello's purse to get the Regis report, but we're kind of sure that's where it is, right? You know where Tello leaves her purse when she isn't taking it with her, Jose?
Where?
The 19th floor. She knows that nobody will come up there looking for it up there, right? Yeah. Then came the closed meeting in April and subsequent announcement on Haddock Terlahi submitted 2 letters to the CLTC in late March and in early April seeking the Commission's findings, the Regis report. In the April letter, Terlahi noted the Commission considered the matter a personnel issue and denied disclosing the report, but she urged them to reevaluate the decision. You know, that's what I'm saying. Oh, I'm a chairman of a board. It's a personnel matter. End of story, right? The allegation of alteration raised by the land agent is essentially a matter of great public interest to beneficiaries as to how applications are processed, Terlahi wrote. Additionally, given that no reason was disclosed during the motion to go into the March 18 executive session, I requested information on the particular allegations as to the director's altering recommendations of the land agent, nature of the executive session, an official report of the findings and resolution, and a copy of the final report of the staff interviews conducted with the trust. She had all right on target, and exactly why I'm saying that John Regis Jr. may very well be playing with fire. You just can't say, well, we're going to go into executive session for the BS reasons that I mentioned. And by the way, they also took counsel into the executive session with them. And then a whole new set of requirements arise if you take counsel into the executive session. The Speaker made an additional request seeking an update on efforts to address issues outlined in a 2020 audit and of the CLTC and copies of any evaluations conducted on the Administrative Director, as well as an update on the Director's 2019 list of priorities. Wow, I can see why Rory doesn't want this guy. Yeah, you know, Rory already went through the Port 7. He doesn't need to take this guy on board and then turn it into the Port 8. So good going, Therese Terlahi. Good going. I'm going to give the Post the coveted blue star on this one. Good reporting, good editorial. Unlike the Daily News, who doesn't seem to have found its voice yet. So here we go, Guam Daily Post. Yeah. Okay, it's time for the card. I have a new feature here. I hope I can find it before I plunge into the card. Oh yeah, here it is. Yeah, I have a new feature. I have 10 politically correct but factually false words and phrases to stop using immediately. To counter the left's lies, conservatives have to use words that accurately reflect the truth, not words that actively mean the opposite. The worst thing one can do with words is to surrender them. George Orwell, we all know who he is, wrote in 1946 essay, Politics in the English Language. And I just really glum onto this because you'll know that it's something that I talk about all the time, how the left is changing the meaning of words and therefore attempting to interfere with our thought processes. A classic example is using they to refer to one person. Now, they are going to tell you, well, you know, it's so awkward to say his or her or he. You know, I would tell everyone that he or she should bring his book to class, right? That's so awkward. Just say they. But, of course, what they mean when they say they is That way you are in synchronization with the non-binary folks out there. You know, everybody isn't one or the other. Everybody isn't he or she. You know, we've got transsexuals and sexual conversions and polyamories. So by not using he or she, him or her, etc., by going with this, what are your pronouns, then what they've tricked us into doing is going along with this non-binary idea that there are more than two sexes. So don't do it. Don't say, I saw Jose yesterday and they're really looking good. Just don't do it. I do it all the time, but I try to poke fun at it when I do it, and I try to embarrass people when I catch them using it, because it is a trick. It's exactly what this article is talking about. So there are 10 items here. I'll do one every day. Today is mainstream media. Don't use the term mainstream media. The public communication cartel headed by the New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, CBS, and MSNBC, that's the public communication cartel, does not represent mainstream Americans. Earlier this year, Axios, another culprit of heavy-handed political spin, reported that 56% of Americans believe, quote, journalists and reporters are purposely trying to mislead people by saying things they know are false or gross exaggerations. And I'm going to get to one of those here today with our local media. Big media has engaged in deception through false and misleading, quote, reporting on Georgia's election laws, the trespass and unrest at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, and more. Embracing Russiagate and the allegations of the Steele dossier against President Trump was one indicator of crumbling credibility. The cover-up of the Hunter Biden laptop story just before the 2020 election was another. That was classic. That was classic. The New York Post found it. The New York Post is the oldest newspaper in America. It is far more credible than the Times. When the laptop was discovered, which later on, Hunter never said, no, that's not my laptop. He wrote a book about it, so it was obviously genuine. 5 days after the laptop was discovered, the New York Times wrote an article criticizing the Post. Yeah. The public communications cartel. Even more recently, CBS 60 Minutes, and what a disappointment this is. For most of my life, I used to set my clock around 60 minutes.
On Sunday evenings. Well, here it's Mondays.
Yeah, but I used to think that was, I hated to miss 60 Minutes. Back in the days before we could record programs, it was so good. But, oh. Even more recently, CBS 60 Minutes invented a scandal about Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis while giving minuscule cover to New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's cover-up of COVID-19 nursing home deaths his policies caused. And even when they were outed on the DeSantis, they didn't come forward with a full clarification. So forget it, 60 Minutes. As far as I'm concerned, you aren't even 2 minutes of my time. Leftist propaganda outlets who were running cover for Democrats and spreading inaccurate opposition research on conservatives don't deserve to be called mainstream. Instead, use big media, corporate media, or as DeSantis says, smear merchants. So no more mainstream media on Tall Tales, Jose.
Who is the pundit that says lamestream media?
Yeah,
I like that one.
That's a good one too. So I'll come back to number two tomorrow. Number two is gender when you mean sex. All right. So let's get into the card here. I've still got a little bit of time left today. My program notes handy. Starting out with Steve, Troy ran a pretty interesting one dealing with the police department today. I'll let it age for a little while and come back with that. It's once again stands for the proposition of don't bother Steve. You know, I understand. I got this from sort of a disreputable source, but I understand Steve and his wife were talking one day, and Steve's wife said to Steve, Steve, what are you going to do when you get to the office today? And Steve says, nothing. And his wife said, but you did that yesterday. And Steve said, yeah, but I wasn't finished. Yeah, a very disreputable source, right? Whispered that in my ear.
Well, only two people had that conversation, Bob.
Uh-huh. All right, so much for Steve. Going on beyond Steve, we got to talk a little bit more about the Chauvin verdict today and all the virtue signaling that we see. You know, people stepping forward to righteousness preen. That would be the governor and Senator Nelson, who take the opportunity to demagogue the issue. But as per yesterday, Robert Underwood got it right. And Mary Torres has an odd approach to the administrative adjudication law. The key word in the phrase administrative adjudication law is administrative. And Joanne Brown shows that something that's brown can be transparent. Yeah. So let's jump in here, starting out with the Governor and Nelson versus GPD. Government officials react on George Floyd murder verdict. Today, quote, today we exhale, we mourn. Governor Leon Guerrero and Senator Nelson on Wednesday shared their sentiments about the guilty verdict handed down in the murder of George Floyd, whose death sparked protests against police brutality, especially against Black Americans. This quote, this verdict holds Derek Chauvin accountable for his actions, but there's no justice in a system that allows and too often excuses police brutality against people of color, especially the Black community, the governor said. I guess the governor was looking around. Is there anybody from any of the networks here? I want to make a statement that has absolutely nothing to do with the jurisdiction where she's the governor, except for the fact that 3 of her cops pumped over 20 rounds into a citizen about 3 months ago, and we still haven't heard anything at all about what's going to happen to those officers. But of course, the people that were shot were just Chamorros. They weren't Black Americans. So for the governor, that doesn't make much difference. Because the governor said, there is no justice in a system that allows and too often excuses police brutality against people of color, especially the Black community. And then a jury in Minneapolis on Tuesday convicted former police officer Derek Chauvin. We all know that. The governor said the outcome of the trial will not bring Floyd back and will not end systemic racism. So the governor has weighed in with the identity politics folks and taken the word systemic racism as one of her own. This is the first time that I recall the governor buying into systemic racism. But if you're going to demagogue, you might as well do it right. But today, we exhale, we mourn, and we continue the fight, the governor says. Now, this is, the governor is someone who has really had the fuzzy end of the lollipop of the American system, Born in poverty, raised in poverty, just making today's food stamps try to last, right? Never had the advantage of a good education. Her brothers never had the advantage of none of the doors in politics or business were open to her. But this is what she says. The outcome of the trial will not bring Floyd back and will not end systemic racism. Today we exhale, we mourn, and we continue the fight. Now, who is the we? Is that her administration?
Maybe she bought a white coat.
Yeah, it's got to be her administration. We continue the fight. Nelson said, "This is a monumental case that delivers the justice our nation has been working toward for so long. It's also a moment that signals us to continue working toward a more proactive police force, like our own, like our own, that so far hasn't demonstrated any particular skill set except guarding the chief of police's motorcycle. A proactive police force that replaces brutality with purposeful action and compassion and provides more meaningful solutions to the challenges in our diverse society." Yeah, I should have brought my box of Kleenex with me to read how well that the governor and Senator Nelson dealt with the Chauvin verdict, how they were able to make noise with their mouth without really saying anything. And of course, they had enough opportunity to read what other people said so they could come up with pithy quotes. And then I go back again to Robert Underwood, who I talked about yesterday. Former Congressman Robert Underwood, in an interview with Patty Arroyo, said that while there is a sense of relief that the country is not going to have mass riots, there's also a sense that justice has been served. And that's a little bit more important, I believe. I think that what we have seen here is the application of the rule of law, that the rule of law applies to law enforcement as much as it applies to the general community. And that's really an important feature of this, of course, throughout our lives. He added, "The victory here should be for the rule of law." A responsible public figure comes out and gets it right, and these two dodos, Nelson and the governor, have got to say, I watched Al Sharpton on TV, so I know what to say. Yeah. By the way, there's some new laws coming up, Jose. Some of the states are changing their whole 911 structure. Oh. Yeah, they're putting laws in place that say that when you call 911, the call can't be routed to Benjamin Crump.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's defending something that's indefensible right now.
Well, and he's always the first guy on the spot. What's his name? The guy that invented the electric cars?
Tesla?
The Tesla is the car. What's the guy?
I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
Elon Musk?
Yeah, Elon Musk is going to furnish Crump with a Tesla, with his marking, with his livery on the side, because with that car, Crump will get to the crime scene before the cops do, and it'll be good advertising for Tesla. Yeah.
He's a chaser.
We used to talk about ambulance chasers, but Crump's not going to chase ambulance. They're too slow. Okay, let's take a short break, and I'll come back into a little bit more of the Chauvin verdict. I've got another Joe on the line again, ACLU and abortion discussion. Another Joe, if I've got time at the end of the show. All right.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Hey! Big news! Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community, yet national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the Radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
Okay, so here we are back again to that big trial, and I've got some really good materials here. I'll try to summarize a little bit to bring some sense to what we actually saw. And now, you know, we have another shooting in Columbus, and you'll recall that I went through the three methods, or the four methods of dealing with criminal activity. There's the optics, there is the critical race method, there is the social justice method, and then there's the way we've been doing it for about 1,000 years in our system. And of course, the optics usually control the day. And this is an article that ran in Red State. Sometimes it feels like there are two different universes in which the left and right respectively reside. Today is one of those days. As I reported last night, an officer-involved shooting of a 16-year-old girl occurred in Columbus, Ohio. Now, the girl is black and the cop is white. That's all you need. I could stop reading right here, right?
But wait, there's more.
Yeah. So that, you know, that's all you need to know. All you got to do from there is you can grab a rope and find the nearest sour apple tree, and you're in business, right? Upon release of the body cam footage, it became clear that the officer acted appropriately, only firing when Ma'Khia Bryant went to stab another girl she was in an altercation with. Immediately, rumors that Bryant was unarmed or that police didn't warn her became prominent on social media. Protest crowds gathered and the hot takes started to flow about how the officer should have tased her or tackled her or called a social worker. Now the White House is getting in on the act. Joe Biden released a statement that I can only describe as absolutely disgusting. The President of the United States.
Why would he say anything at all?
Well, he's the president, right? The shooting has nothing to do with race. There was not a single piece of evidence to support such an assertion, nor would it make any sense anyway. What has that got to do with anything, right? Even the Derek Chauvin trial, did you hear one scintilla of evidence about a racial animus on the part of the cops?
Not on the trial.
Not a thing. But still, you know, the issue was race. Yeah. The shooting has nothing to do with race. The police were called to the scene and presented with a deadly weapon. This wasn't some setup to hunt black people. Yet Biden, or better yet his handlers, highlight race and supposed police violence while ignoring that this was a justified shooting of someone who was attempting to murder another unarmed girl. It doesn't get much more clear-cut than this, but if you read the statement, you get the impression of a racist white cop went out and shot a black teenage girl out of racial malice. Isn't that what happened? I mean, the cop was white, the girl was black. What else do you need to know? It's hard to put into words how gross and dangerous that is. It propagates a clearly false narrative about the shooting while inciting more violence and unrest. Disinformation is already rampant surrounding the incident in question. We didn't need Joe Biden adding to that. Jen Psaki was asked about this today, and she doubled down. Again, two separate universes. What does implicit bias have to do with a cop discharging his weapon to stop someone from stabbing another person? Is the suggestion that the officer would not have acted and allowed the stabbing to happen if the aggressor was white? Nothing of what Psaki says makes sense, but as I've said many times before, it's not meant to make sense. It's meant to push the narrative, and she knows she won't be called on it. At this point, what other conclusion am I to draw except the Democrats and their media allies want racial unrest? And the only thing I could say to that, you know, when I'm looking at this piece here, not knowing the name of the author, but what I'm saying is, right on, Sherlock. What else could they be interested in? And then Tucker Carlson causes eruptions by discussing the elephant in the room of the Chauvin trial. Leave it to Tucker. After the verdict was announced yesterday in the Derek Chauvin trial, the virtue signalers on the left and in the media, but I repeat myself, all but tripped over themselves to weigh in with their, in some cases, bizarre hot takes. Now that's Nelson and the governor, on what it all meant and how to note how, though gratifying, it hardly represented their version of justice. That's what both of them said. But while an odd mixture of relief and disappointment was expressed by the usual suspects about the verdict given, what they proclaimed to know about the case and what was not mentioned by these same people was what some feel was the elephant in the room of the Derek Chauvin jury. Unafraid to tackle such controversial topics, even in the face of repeated and failed attempts at canceling his program, Fox News' Tucker Carlson wondered during the open monologue last night whether jurors might have factored in what Democrat politicians and radical BLM activists previously said about the case as what would likely happen in their city if they voted to acquit Chauvin. Okay, I'm going to take a short break here, and let me see what I got here. Still got another Joe waiting in the waiting room. So I'm going to come back to this, and I'll give another Joe a little time at the very end.
At Chili's, our burgers are flavorful works of art. Starting from inspiration, our handcrafted burgers are a collection of fresh ingredients put together on a toasted brioche bun. Choose from juicy, mouth-watering options like our Boss Burger, Ultimate Bacon Burger, or the new Chef Alex's Santa Fe Burger, loaded with avocado, Swiss cheese, fresh veggie, cilantro, and spicy Santa Fe sauce. Served with garlic dill pickles and fries. Treat yourself today and enjoy our juicy, yummy, handcrafted creations. Chili's is located on the second floor of the Tumont Sands Plaza. Chili's, savor the moment.
Top of the day, this is Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio. Earth Month is a global movement, and it starts here at home. From Jigo to Inalahan and everywhere in between, cleanup projects, no matter the scale, help restore our island's beauty. Let's reconnect with our island and join us for the Guam Earth Month Island-wide Beautification Cleanup on Saturday, April 24th at 6 a.m. We all have a part in rebuilding a stronger, cleaner, greener Guam. Call 473-1162 for more details.
Churchill Downs in Louisville, and here's what Tucker said. The jury in the Derek Chauvin trial came to a unanimous and unequivocal verdict Tuesday afternoon. Quote, "Please don't hurt us." The jurors spoke for many in this country. Everyone understood perfectly well the consequences of an acquittal in this case. After nearly a year of burning, looting, and murder by BLM, that was never in doubt. Last night, 2,000 miles from Minneapolis, police in Los Angeles preemptively blocked roads in L.A. Why? They knew what would happen if Derek Chauvin got off. But here's what we can't debate. No mob has the right to destroy our cities, not under any circumstances, not for any reason. No politician or media figure has the right to intimidate a jury. Are you listening, Anti-Max? And no political party has the right to impose a different standard of justice on its own supporters. Those things are unacceptable in America, but all of them are happening now. If they continue to happen, decent, productive people will leave. The country as we know it will be over. So we must stop this current insanity. Nelson and Leon Guerrero, we must stop this current insanity. It's an attack on civilization. Can we trust the way the decision was made? He asked. Naturally, some of Carlson's most notoriously dishonest critics characterize his argument because, of course, they did. MMFA had a similar hot take, which yours truly responded to, and the unhinged criticisms would not be complete without throwing a white supremacist into the mix, right? That's the answer there. Oh, Tucker Carlson? Oh, he's a white supremacist. The discerning reader view of the segment will note that Carlson's actual issue here was concern about the jury being tainted, intimidated, influenced by incendiary Democrat politicians, as well as rioters who spent months burning down city blocks across the country while chanting, "No justice, no peace." Well, a judge in the trial, Peter Cahill, indicated he was confident that the jury had remained sequestered and thus was unaware of the remarks made by various Democrats, including President Joe Biden and Representative Maxine Waters. Questions still remain about whether such comments, the rioting that took place for months in Democrat-run cities, as well as the media, quote, reports that revealed personal details on some of the jurors, all may have had a chilling effect on the jury. Thanks to Carlson raising such questions, that debate will play out in the coming weeks, much to the media's, that is the left's, chagrin. Because if there's one thing these so-called purveyors of truth truly hate, it's when people have the nerves to start questioning their established narratives. And that, of course, is exactly what it's all about, the established narrative of the left. We're so familiar with it. We saw it right here on Guam. I'm surprised that Tom Shea and Mariana Leon Guerrero aren't seeking out reporters to tell them about the victory lap that they're taking now with their white coats for Black Lives Matter. Okay, so we're heading to Churchill Downs. Or have we already been there?
Already been there.
We've already been to Churchill
We're on the
Downs.
stretch, yes.
We're down the home stretch. So I'm going to give another Joe a little floor time here to talk about abortion. Go ahead, another Joe.
So I haven't heard anything recently in a few days about the ACLU lawsuit and the tele-abortion prescription pills. And I don't hear any Republicans coming out with a united statement saying that, hey, we're pro-life, and if there's any concern about these abortion pills, we're pro-life, and we'll try to address that issue. I don't know what else the Republicans are working on as a party, but it would seem that this could be one of the issues they could be working on. Have you heard of a joint statement regarding
I'm going to
being
skip.
pro-life?
I'm going to skip ahead to number 10 here on my list. Right, number 10 on my list of things you should never say: pro-choice. Pro-choice is a euphemism to get around having to call yourself pro-abortion. But just as we don't use, quote, pro-choice to describe supporting a person's decision to murder another, we shouldn't use it here. Abortion denies giving the unborn baby the choice to live. In that sense, it's violently anti-choice. This invasion of one's mind by ready-made phrases, it's back to George Orwell, can only be prevented if one is constantly a guard against them. Sloppy, inaccurate phrases will construct your thoughts for you, he says, and perform the important service of partially concealing your meaning, even from yourself. Don't let corrupt media and politicians design your words and supplant your meaning. To win the culture debate, you better first define your terms. So that's about pro-choice. But we are not pro-life. We're anti-abortion. And we need to be upfront about that, Another Joe. Otherwise, we're sliding right into the same game that they're playing there. They would have you think that there is a moral equivalency. Well, yeah, he's pro-life, but I'm pro-choice, so, 6 of one. But no, it's not 6 of one, half of the other. And no, it's not pro-choice, it's pro-abortion. So can we do that, Another Joe?
Yeah, sure. I wish any Republican senator would say, "Hey, I'm anti-abortion."
Good. Forget about being pro-life. Yeah, okay.
So, if any Republican senators are out there listening, please call in and address the issue of being anti-abortion.
Good. Yeah, I'm waiting for someone to poke his head up now. The last thing that happened in that lawsuit was a motion to dismiss. The judge took the motion under advisement, so someday she will either grant or deny the motion to dismiss, and she will give us a written opinion, or maybe this, I don't remember if this was heard by the judge or by the magistrate, but anyhow, we'll have a written opinion, and that leaves several other options open to us. But there is no news on the front right now. And I share your view, Another Joe. It's up to the Republicans. It's up to the anti-abortions to keep this ball bouncing all the time. This is not something that we could do on the third Thursday of every month or something like that. It's got to be a daily undertaking, right, Another Joe?
I agree, and I appreciate your giving the time to talk about it. Next week, talk about take care.
All right. So I still got a little bit more on. Maybe I'll save. I still got a lot more to do on this whole Chauvin thing and the phoniness that the whole decision has brought out in people who perhaps go to some lengths to describe being phonies, who have really outed themselves with silly statements like the governor and Senator Nelson. So I want to go next to Jesse Kanga versus the Election Commission. Ethics Commission seeks budgetary autonomy from the administration. Bill 85, which intends to affirm the independence of the Guam Ethics Commission. Boy, I can't think of a more independent commission than this one right now. They don't do anything. You can't criticize them for anything they've done because they haven't done anything. It received general support from the commission Wednesday, although GEC Executive Director Jesse Kanga recommended some amendments to strengthen the bill. I'll bet he did. The commission requested the body consider the following amendments, which would remove the Bureau of Budget and Management Research from applying any budgetary controls, and the Department of Administration from withholding allotments on any appropriation made to the Guam Ethics Commission. Nice. Only the governor's office is treated like that. This is identical to language adopted to promote the independence of the Election Commission and similar exclusions afforded to agencies such as the Attorney General and public accountability. He added, the amendment identifies and closes a potential, quote, back door that a future administration may have to undermine the commission, according to Kanga. I don't think the commission needs any help in being undermined. They're doing a really good job of that themselves. You know, they were sworn in back in February, and so far, all they've talked about, well, we got to get an office and we got to hire an executive director, et cetera. Their product is zero, and there's no excuse for that, really. Other than the proposed budgetary amendments, Bill 85 identifies the commission as an autonomous and independent commission with the mandate of appointing an executive director, which they already have, who is then assigned various responsibilities and requirements. These include acting as the ex officio secretary for the commission, overseeing personnel matters, etc. Now, I'm just betting you dollars to donuts that the proponent of this bill, and probably the draftsman, is a certain Jesse Kanga. Joe San Augustine introduced it. There were some concerns from lawmakers. Joanne Brown said she appreciated the commission's position regarding their budget, but had concerns with the proposed amendments. I have to say the amendments being forth are just a bit much, Brown said. The judiciary of Guam is supposedly free from political interference, but I don't have the judiciary coming in and reading a whole litany of protections with regards to their budget to the degree that is undefined. Sabina Paris noted other, quote, autonomous agencies on Guam are revenue generating and have procurement authority versus going through the General Service Agency. Kanga said another bill introduced by Paris, Bill 9436, would allow the commission to be somewhat autonomous by requiring that all government employees undergo ethics training. This would provide a steady revenue stream for the commission. I wonder how. Are we going to charge everybody $5 to take that test? You know, the Ethics Commission is not even operating yet. As far as I can see, they're skating on ethically thin ice, albeit not completely, but will provide additional supplemental resources, Kanga said. Paris said the commission's funding is an issue and that they wanted to avoid that becoming a means of controlling the Ethics Commission. However, she echoed Brown's concern and said the budgetary process is there to balance the needs of the government. Responding to Paris and Brown, Kanga clarified the legislature would still have power to determine the commission's budget. Well, that's big of him. The proposed amendments would only remove BBMR's budgetary controls. The Ethics Commission is subject to, like most government of Guam agencies, a reserve in our annual appropriation, and we already don't receive much. So what we'd like to see is the liberty to be able to use the full budget. So I have, I took a peek at the bill. I didn't copy the whole thing, but I did copy, I do have the part that Kanga is most concerned about that really sheds a lot of light on the whole project. Section 3 of the bill would amend 15407 of Title 4. And it says, the commission shall appoint an executive director who shall administer the laws of Guam. I thought that was the governor's job. All commission policies, etc. Perform and discharge all powers, duties, purposes, etc. Be ex officio secretary of the commission. And then here it is, be a member of the unclassified service, receive an annual salary within the range of compensation to be prescribed by the commission. Are you listening, Angel Sablon? Said executive director shall serve at the pleasure of the commission, provided, however, that the executive director may not be removed unless that person's removal is ratified by a vote of 5 commissioners. Supermajority to fire him. So a little bit self-serving there, Jesse Kanga. All right, so much for the Ethics Commission for today. And so much for Tall Tales today, but we're going to be back tomorrow, big as life and twice as ugly.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. President Biden marking that vaccine milestone yesterday by urging the unvaccinated to roll up their sleeves.
The data could not be clearer at this point. If you are fully vaccinated, 2 weeks beyond your last shot, you are nearly 100% protected against death from COVID, no matter what your age.
And the president asking employers to offer paid time off to people to get inoculated or to recover from the shot if they don't feel well afterwards. The Centers for Disease Control releasing a study of 75 skilled nursing facilities in Chicago. Among the nearly 15,000 residents and staff members who are fully vaccinated, there have been only 22 infections reported and just 1 death. But there are more issues for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
The FDA released documents showing serious sanitary violations at a plant in Baltimore that previously ruined millions of doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. The facility, run by Emergent Biosolutions, was shut down and inspected earlier this month.
Fox's David Lee Miller. Another night of protests in Columbus, Ohio, over Tuesday's shooting death of a teenage girl by a police officer.
A lot of emotion, a lot of tension. We've been hearing a lot of chanting, people gathering. They are calling for justice. They are saying a lot about say her name, things of that nature.
Haley Nelson of Fox 28. The police department has released additional video of the shooting showing the officer stopped the girl from stabbing another teen. A North Carolina sheriff's deputy who shot and killed a man while serving a search warrant yesterday has been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. In New York City, thousands of prostitution-related cases dating back to the 70s thrown out at the request of the Manhattan District Attorney, who says he'll no longer prosecute many offenses related to sex work. America is listening to Fox News.
Jason in the House, the Jason Chaffetz podcast. There is always someone